Hey y'all, notifications are going out, so we're gonna give people just a few minutes here to come into the room. Um, and hopefully everyone is doing well. Let's see. All right, while we're waiting for people to come into the room, I have the Entertainers Are Not Leaders tee available in the link below if you would like to purchase one of those. Um, Hey, Lavon. Hey, I don't know. I have no clue how you say that. Sit. I don't even want to try because I'm gonna mess up. You gotta put you have to put the pronunciation in the chat for me. Hey, JB1. So I was actually supposed to do this live yesterday, but I was under the weather. This like allergy and weather changing and all this stuff has been getting to me a little bit. But I feel much better. So we're going to talk about this today. Um, there has been a petition that has been created by YouTuber Paris Malone that addresses and basically demands that Colin Kaepernick, the ex NFL player, removes this new cover art from his book that is going to be about abolishing the police. So I have some notes here if y'all see me looking down, and kind of just some things that I like, some points that I want to make sure that I touch, because I think this is a really good opportunity to have, in some regard, a very candid, discussion about not only abolishing the police, but how this ties into the imagery that is being used as well as celebrity, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of what the petition is saying on change.org. And so far, this petition has gotten where is it? Over 23,000 signatures. And, it looks like their goal is 25,000. But you can see the cover art here, okay? So, and we're just going to read just a small part of this. So it says, ex-NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick has recently announced the release date of his new book, Abolition for the People, The Movement for a Future Without Policing and Prisons. Unfortunately, the art cover created by artist and ex-Black Panther Emory Douglas displays a dark-skinned Black woman promoting abolish the police and close the prisons. This art is harmful to the image of particularly dark-skinned Black women, who are often promoted in the media as loud, undesired, aggressive, masculine, combative, and promotes the false agenda that dark-skinned Black women are an oppositional force to law enforcement. This will contribute to more instances of us being the recipients of rampant wounding misogynoir. We are already a marginalized, unprotected, and ignored group who have the highest rates of interracial related domestic violence, and this art cover going mainstream will further contribute to our mistreatment in this society. So that basically gives you kind of like just a brief synopsis of the take on this. And I will link this below. Like I said, it's on change.org. Over 23,000 signatures so far. So, like I said, I think this is a good opportunity to kind of expand on, because this has different levels to it. And I think that a lot of times the conversations like this have been attempted to be packaged, right, into bullet points, into hashtags, into things like that. Even if you look at a term like abolish the police, go on the internet, try to figure out what they mean by abolish the police, and it's like for everybody, it's something different. It's no concise what that actually means. If you read some of these people's opinions, right, these progressive social justice scholars, they'll say abolish the police, but then they'll turn it around to defund. Okay, something that I've been telling people to be um uh noticeable of is how in our current culture, this is being done through mainstream media, social media. They're trying to remove our understanding of what words mean and that words have actual definitions. To abolish and to defund is not the same thing. So, I am kind of interested to see what is going to be said in this book as the pathway for whatever like abolishing the police actually means. And then sometimes when you read it, it'll say stuff like reimagining. You know, they all say like the same little like word salad. And it's like, okay, but you're not telling me like what this means. Oh, well, maybe we need community caretakers and what does that even mean? And we have to be honest about the continuum of force and how that plays into getting people to do what you say, right? And I mean, let's just be real. That's a main reason why the government wants to disarm people. Okay. So this idea that people are just gonna do what you say or make community safer, say make communities safer, yet having no real authority. Um we'll come back to that because that's a whole nother different conversation. But anyway, so first things first about this petition, I will say that, and Blake said, ironically, Biden and his ilk are giving the police more funds, even here in Atlanta under Keisha Bottoms. Well, the crazy part about it is, I mean, he never said otherwise. He was very honest and forthcoming about it. I don't know why people continue to paint these people as something that they're not. That's why a big part of on my social media, I will show clips of what your actual celebrities, entertainers, quote unquote leaders, politicians, the direct quotes from them, right? Or direct articles from mainstream media. But anyway, so on face value, looking at this petition, I agree on face value that something that I've been talking about for a while is that mainstream media has tried to have a monopoly on Blackness, a monopoly on Black culture, right? Nino Black brought up Joe Biden, a old white man having the gall to say, if you don't do XYZ, you ain't Black, and things like that. So one thing that I've really, kind of talked about and have tried to promote is, first of all, we are not a monolith, regardless of how the media tries to project it. Okay. Yes, you're going to have some similarities across, culture, across race, and things like that. You're going to have some communal things in common. However, we are not a monolith. So, for example, when I travel and I'm in, let's say, the West Coast or even up north, right? There are automatically some cultural differences that may not be, you know, may not appear to be super significant, but these things play a part in who we are and shouldn't be disregarded just because the media is telling me that what it means to be Black should be based on the blackness coming out of Hollywood, right? I saw somebody tweet the other day saying, if you pass black people sitting on their porch, make sure you hunk because they love that, right? And I'm like, yeah, we love that in the South, but you try that somewhere else, and people might think like what the heck is going on? I had a friend that actually visited my home in the South from up north, and we were standing outside, and people's passing, and everybody's hunking. Everybody that passes is hunking. And I'm just, and he's like, do you know all these people? I'm like, no, I don't know these people. And he's like, why is everybody hunking? Like, is that an actual thing? You know what I mean? Just, small differences that we may not think of and stuff like that. And other places, it could be, I don't want to really say like offensive, but it could be like, what's up with that type, like, let me see about this type energy. So because of these differences, because of social media allowing us to create spaces, to create niches, to find like-minded people, to find people that have other interests as us and things like that, I've talked about how this is the best opportunity for us to create counter narratives and counter messages. I'm the type of person that, I'm not really going to, I think in some ways, I don't believe it's in a negative way, but in some ways, I feel like I've come to accept what the mainstream media is, what politics is, what it was, the system that it is, what is was created to do, and feeling like my mission doesn't always align with that. So I wouldn't particularly be like, oh, Kaepernick, you need to change the image on your cover. However, I absolutely support people that are changing, creating counter narratives, right? Kind of breaking and getting out of those stereotypes of all black people act like this. No black people do this or into this or have this hobby or engage in this or think like this, and so that is a ongoing battle. I do not think that is unique, okay, to black people. I feel like practically every culture, if you turn on your TV, it, there's a stereotype. And so I feel like building these communities, changing the narrative kind of gives us an opportunity to address those things. So on the value of that, to see a group of women that are like, no, we don't like the narrative that's being pushed, and particularly how it's being attached to our image, I think is commendable. You know. Also, if we are being real about this abolish the police conversation, so I'm gonna speak from my personal experience. Thank you, India. If we are speaking from personal experience, I am speaking from my personal experience. I'm sorry, y'all. This idea of as it relates to abolish the police appears to me to be 99.9% internet stuff. Okay. Do you have people that want to possibly defund the police, as in some you having some resources going into other avenues that would be more beneficial to these communities? Yes, I would say that is true, but the definition to abolish means to end or remove. I do not think that's a as popular opinion as we've been made to believe. And that's something that the mainstream media is really good about, is that, they'll take a very kind of like fringe group or fringe idea, and they'll push it to the front, right? And that is also, again, where some of these stereotypes are formed. So even online, on Twitter, on Instagram, when you see people talking about abolishing the police, from what I've seen, it's mostly college kids, celebrities, and white affluent kids. Even as we saw some of the rallies over the previous year, you had a lot of these BLM and Antifa kind of mixing in, and a lot of these BLM protests being heavily influenced, infiltrated, whatever you want to call it, by kids that were coming into neighborhoods that they're not even from. I've heard this from people that I've actually, I know personally, coming into neighborhoods that they're not even from, right? Being destructive, carrying these abolish the police signs, and then going back to their neighborhood. So, these are some things to think about, like who should actually be the face and the representation of that. I do not believe for 1 second, and I've yet to meet one person, even one, like not even a half of a person in real life that has mentioned, talked about, been a proponent of abolishing the police. So then you have to ask yourself, why would they want to push this image on Black women, right? And so something that I've examined here recently is that, so y'all remember around election time, it was this whole thing of, oh, Black women again saved America, right? But if you are pushing a country further and further towards any type of lawlessness, any type of, and why I say lawlessness, I use that word specifically because, like I said, when you actually go and look at the content for some of these abolitionists have, it's not a very thorough, well thought out information that is holistic and it's easy to understand or digest. And one thing that we see happen time and time again with politicians, this is why I always tell people, don't just think about the law and how you feel about it. Think about how these things would be applied. Think about how they would come to fruition and things like this. We have to take a really more deeply holistic way to how we're addressing these societal issues and things like that. So you will have it where it's almost like a setup where, oh, it went from Black women saved America to now look at the increase in crime that's happening in these inner cities. And we already have news agencies that are already reporting, particularly when we got out of the lockdowns officially, right? According to the news, we saw this very huge uptick in crime, particularly in these bigger cities and things like that. Who lives in these cities? As someone who has worked particularly with mothers, single mothers, and things like that, people want to feel safe, okay? Do I think that there are other ways? Yes. This is why I always talk about people becoming armed, taking more personal responsibility for their communities, right? We'll see a situation with a Micaiah Bryant where, unfortunately, because nobody in this community was able to control, command the situation, you end up calling somebody that is not from this neighborhood, and now you can't dictate, you can't call somebody and then dictate how they respond in that type of situation. It does not make sense. It's not logical. And so, you know, people want to feel safe. I think there are different routes to do this, and I think in some ways this is what they're saying too. But we have to remember the media is really good for pushing word play, and it's a reason why they will say distinctively abolish the police. Abolish has a definition, which means to end or remove. And when people see crime going up in these areas, when you have a demographic that feels like they are not being protected, they want the ability to, that if something happens, I have someone to call. It just doesn't make sense. And I even said last year, I said both defund the police and abolish the police, just off the terminology, is not going to hit and resonate with a lot of people like people are thinking it is. Um, it's just not. So it's just not. And I'm gonna come back a little bit at the end to talk a little bit more about the community aspect and some things that I could think can be done as well. Now, um, something about this petition that I was kind of on the fence about, that I have two competing thoughts about, and I'm going to kind of explain it to y'all and hope that y'all can follow me, is that another thing I think that we have to address, because I noticed that some people with this petition were posting Colin Kaepernick's girlfriend, who, if y'all don't know, let me show you what she looks like. All right, so let's show y'all this just in case y'all don't know. So this is his girlfriend, Nessa Diab, and she is Egyptian and Middle Eastern. And, you know, people were saying, well, why would you put this lady on the cover, but yet in your romantic life, in your business life, in your family life, we oftentimes see you with women that look more like this as opposed to women that look like this. Now, I'm going to tell you, both of my thoughts about this, okay? So, the first thing that comes to mind, this is something that I've been talking about on Twitter. And this is, I feel, shaky territory in some regards, because if you will notice, some of the people that are the loudest as it relates to social justice, in a way of particularly people that hyper focus on representation, I think that we really need to also examine how some of this translates into sexual desirability and access, and the shaky ground that that is, right? So what I mean by that is that For example, I saw this video on uh I saw this video on Instagram the other day, and it was this Asian lady, and she's talking about, oh, the world is full of white men, and we got to get rid of these white people. And I want all my Asian ladies to seduce these white men and sleep with them. And, because my Asian genes are going to take over, and we can, get rid of all the white men in the world. That's basically what she was saying. People were sharing this as if it made so much sense. And to me, you just sound like you trying to use that as a means to be sexually desired and to have access, right? And where this becomes problematic is when you have people that will use other people when that's their actual goal. So, for example, what I mean is you'll have like a Don Lemon that'll go on CNN and say white men are the biggest terror threat in America, and every night you're laying down with a white man, right? And he's not the only example of that, okay? So they will use this as a means to get to their agenda. Where this gets tricky with Colin Kaepernick is that there's an example of him doing this, right? Because you date somebody that doesn't look like the woman that was said, like you put on your cover art and things like that. You'll use this pro-blackness, even though you grew up in an affluent white family neighborhood, had all these resources and things like this. You'll use it as a means to an end to increase your celebrity, but then your choices don't really reflect that, right? But in some ways, the same thing can be said for women that would, attack or feel some type of way about his girlfriend as well. Now, the difference is only one person in this scenario is the grifter. One side is getting the short end of the stick. That's the everyday woman, as opposed to a celebrity who is doing these business choices, right? And projecting themselves to be this person, and it kind of not really lining up with their family life and business life and dating choices and things like that. So those are just some things to think about, and I think that I'm gonna maybe at a later time do a little bit more content about that, because sometimes you will have these voices being the loudest, and in some ways it's really seeking of white validation, or not even necessarily white, right? It could be sexual validation, sexual desirability. And if that's what your social justice is about, or the means to an end, uh like like what does that even really mean if it's not about, you know uh quality of life, standard of living, and things like that? So um I've been seeing a lot of people lately kind of shield the things that they're promoting and doing, uh use social justice as a mask for really like something in them wanting to be validated, wanting to, I've talked about this with anything, right? We see like they'll change a character. I did the content on Ariel the mermaid, and they'll change a character, to black. And it's like, for some people, that's such a win. It's such this so it's like a level of validation. But I'm like, what does that actually account for? It's just very symbolic and doesn't really, especially when you think about who controls the media, and this obsession with wanting people who generally probably don't like you, probably don't care about you, probably would stereotype you, you know what I mean? Most likely are doing this for the money. Most likely are doing this because it's the popular, trendy thing to do right now. Being like over consumed with their representation all of the time just seems odd to me. So far I looked at Colin Kaepernick's uh Twitter and his Instagram. I would like to see Colin Kaepernick change this artwork, just because I want to see if he's going to actually respond to the people, respond to the will of the people, or is it just going to be a high level grifting? And I personally believe that this is going to tell people everything that they need to know about this. You have a petition with over 23,000 going on 25,000 signatures. If you say you are for for black women, supporting black women, want to protect black women, and then you have over 23,000 not just black women led by, but not just only, people sign this and say that they disagree with it and feel like it could be actually harmful to their image and harmful to their actual real life. It adds and lends to stereotypes. If you are propping yourself up to be this, and then you don't need, like, he hasn't even addressed it so far. Like, ignoring that, y'all, like, that would be highly offensive. Highly offensive. You cannot completely ignore the demographic that you are saying that you are promoting, speaking on the behalf of, because, entertainers, we're the voice of the people, particularly black people, right? But I just feel like we're gonna see if he responds. But if not, that's going to even more so solidify in my mind the type of person that Colin Kaepernick is. And y'all know some of the, y'all know some of my previous held views about him, and, like, as it relates to the protesting that he was doing and things like that. But if he goes on to ignore 25,000 people, you at that point, it's no overlooking that is a high level, high ranking grifting. You at minimum, you at least have to address it and be able to account for why you and your team felt like that was the appropriate image. And like I said, if we're really doing it based on what I've seen, and I don't know what y'all have seen as it relates to abolish the police, but like I said, from my personal experience, the abolish the police has been college kids, blue chicks that typically have security, right? Live in gated communities. And then these white affluent kids that come from their neighborhoods across the bridge to hold these abolish the police signs and march in these BLM protests. So if it was to actually be more reflective and I don't see everything. But it appears to be, if it was more reflective of real life, you will put a blue check, which Colin Kaepernick is a blue check. He's highly influential. So why wouldn't you put your own face on the cover? It just makes sense to me. Also, as it relates to abolish the police, if you have been rocking with me for however long, I appreciate you. And y'all kind of know my opinions as it relates to officers. I am, first of all, fully accepting of the Supreme Court ruling. I always tell people it is not about, like, life don't work off how you like feel in your heart, regardless of how good your heart is. Unfortunately, it's moving off what is on paper. Okay, sometimes it's even a saying that says the pen is mightier than the sword. All right, that's for a reason. So I have fully accepted, um according to Supreme Court ruling, that police officers are not uh entitled, they're not held bound to having to protect and serve you, even though they've used this, and y'all use these hashtags that don't be meaning nothing to y'all too, so that y'all either, so they say, hey, we'll come up with us a little slogan too. I mean, that seems to be a common thing, you know. So you'll have some of them that ride around with the protect and serve on their cars. And do you have in situations where officers can take it upon themselves to protect you? Sure, absolutely. Serve you? Sure, absolutely. However, they are not obligated to do that. Beyond the Supreme Court ruling that says that, I have accepted that their actual slogan is law and order. Okay, police enforce law and order, law and order, law and order. That is their primary job. So every single time you doubt a police officer, so when a Ma'Khia Bryant's family or whoever was in that situation calls a police officer, they are not coming there to protect and serve you. The first thing they are going to do is fulfill the law and create order. I need people to internalize this. Don't necessarily take it offensively. I don't mean that by it, but accepting the reality, because when you accept the reality, we can begin to respond and move differently. So in a perfect world, abolishing the police would be a beautiful thing. But first of all, the police, I'm not even going to take y'all down this rabbit hole, but I'll just mention it. You can't vote your way out of the police, because who would enforce the politicians' laws? Who would give a crap what Joe Biden is saying if there is no one there for law and order? As much as these politicians try to appear to y'all hearts or your sensibilities and try to make it seem like they are in some ways oppositional to the police, they know that without the police, they don't exist. There is no politician without the police. Like, So that's the first thing, right? The second thing is that, talking about this whole abolishing the police thing, you cannot talk about this. And I think that was kind of hinted at in this petition as well. You cannot talk about this in a realistic way without addressing the criminal element of what is happening in some of these communities. Like, let's cut the crap. Let's cut the BS. Let's stop hashtagging these things as if it's like, oh, this is the fix, this little 3-word hashtag, without really looking at these things in a very holistic way. And if anybody watching actually has any good resources as far as these steps, somebody that has laid out the actual system and what it will look like as it relates to abolish the police, because I actually want to learn more. I like to read, I like to know other people's opinions, but I have yet to find anything that is a realistic, tangible, specific way of making that happen, right? So I do suggest all the time people becoming armed, people being able to protect themselves, people learning more about like first aid, de escalation, trauma response. You don't know what'll happen when you walk down your street or go out in your neighborhood. You don't know if you will be the person that'll be able to de-escalate, right? Help de-escalate or bring order, help bring order before the law and order enforcers, okay, have to be called in and things like that. Um, but these are things that I recommend and talk about all the time as it relates to addressing the criminal element. People not talking about this in a holistic way. The media, social media is hyping you up to think that just everyday regular people are sitting here talking about abolishing the police, and it's just not the case, okay? It's just about as normal or as common as these, fringe groups that want all this stuff that they're doing with children, and like pride parades and um um something else I'm trying to think of. But you will have people or saying that children should transition and stuff like this, right? You'll get on social media and you will think that these things are just absolutely popular. Everybody's on board with it. And it's just really not the case. A lot of times we have the algorithms boosting certain messages, right? To align, whether it's to push a narrative. Sometimes they are creating and promoting and maintaining certain stereotypes to push agendas and all of those type of things. And so in a perfect world where we could get all of the good people, right? Good, responsible, peaceful, loving people armed, in a perfect world where you had the men in these communities actively, I'm not talking about passively, I'm not talking about just, whatever, but actively engaging the criminal element in these communities, then sure, I think you would be on the right path. That and even beyond, like even before that, even now, some of the ways that we generally, try to use police officers to get police officers involved is not always necessary. It's not always necessary, particularly when you don't know or accept their actual role. So if you're thinking they're for this and you're calling them for this and they're really for that, and then you want to get disappointed, so I think that overall, this petition, I do believe that it has some merit. I absolutely believe that. You have people like Colin Kaepernick that will try to grift off the Black community. And you have a group of people who are putting their foot down, especially as something as polarizing as abolish the police. Right? This is not like just some random thing, y'all. This is a whole political messaging that is very polarizing. And you have a demographic of people saying we're not with it. We're putting our foot down. We don't want to be represented in this way, particularly when we don't see the safety that we would like to get behind this message. Mainstream media would never tell you this. Mainstream media will never talk about this. You're not going to see, you probably won't see any blue checks even mention or validate that this petition is even happening because it goes against their narrative. They don't want you to believe that there are Black women, young Black women, and not even just Black women, but you could say people that support this petition, kind of see what's going on. They don't want you to know that there's a counter narrative that exists. So in this regard, I would say this is important, and I want to see more people gatekeep their images, create counter narratives, push back, because some of these stereotypes that we see, especially recently in some of the television, it's like mind numbing, right? It makes me think about, like, for example, what I mean about by this is something that I've seen people saying on Twitter recently. They'll say how, like, how these new shows, as it relates to like the Black families and Black culture and things like this, how it's so forced. It's so forced, full of propaganda. The storylines aren't written well, right? But then you could look back at a Martin, a Fresh Prince, Family Matters, how these shows were just, they're timeless, they're effortless, right? It brought you that culture, that vibe. It brought you into these spaces without overdoing it, without pushing all this heavy propaganda. And so people are like feeling this stuff, and they're starting to question these images. And so in some regards, whether y'all agree with the person or the people that are behind the petition, I don't think that you can deny the merit, particularly when you have a community that has been used for so long, and they've been met with grifters to no benefit of their own beyond symbolic. It's nothing that I've read so far from any of these people talking about abolishing the police that's any type of comprehensive, actual, specific plan that makes these communities safer. And so some people are going to feel like, well, if you're using this imagery to push this message and you're making money, you're living lavish, you're mingling with people that don't look like, the people on the cover that you say you speak for, you haven't even addressed. You don't even think they were, hey, maybe in a couple days we'll see. We'll see what happens. But so far, I don't even see that you even believe these people to be even worthy enough to address them. You haven't even addressed them, which makes me believe you're either not going to address them, or you're uh currently working with your team to come up with how you're going to flip it, what you're going to say, if you may consider changing the image. You know, but I told people last year, even right in the thick of the protest, like, getting swept away with these hashtags. You will have the algorithms boosting the hashtags. You will have the tech giants boosting the hashtags, the celebrities, the blue checks are boosting the hashtags. And sometimes it don't even, when you go read the black and white, when you go read on paper, that does not benefit you. That does not benefit you. And I'm very interested to see. I was gonna say I might have to try to get a pirated copy. I'm just kidding, y'all. I kind of am interested to see, like, what they have to say as it relates to, how this actually looks. And I want to know the demographic of the people that are gonna buy this book. um as well. I do think that you're gonna have some people that support it just because it has Kaepernick's name on it, and because his stardom, and not even really even agree, necessarily with the message. So we'll see what happens. Because I really I'm really interested to see how he is going to address it, if he even addresses it at all. Name again said, where did this whole abolish the police narrative even stem from? It literally just came out of nowhere. That's like how it is. That's how it is. I think it was an extension of defund the police, and I don't even remember how the longevity of like the whole defund the police movement, but it's like people saw that little um people saw, that entry point, and it's like, oh, we're gonna hitch to this and just say abolish. And the crazy part about it, when it was getting really crazy with the protests last year and Twitter and stuff like that, around the same time people were on Twitter and the hashtag was going crazy about abolish the police, you actually started having all these videos skyrocketing in the algorithms. Think about, excuse me, y'all. Think about this, even today, right? Because you don't see this on a everyday type of thing. But if you remember around that time when Abolish the Police was coming out, all these videos started coming out of black women being like abused by men on Twitter. I don't know if y'all remember that, but I was like, and it was like videos like back to back to back, and they were just eating the algorithm up. And I was like, that's interesting because, okay, you may see a video here and there, but you can kind of tell when something's feeding the algorithm. And I'm like, okay. But like, think about now, you don't see those videos like often just floating around the internet. and stuff like that. And then you have Joe Biden that in no way supports abolishing the police. He doesn't support defunding the police. In fact, he supports giving them more money. And he has been honest about that. He has been honest. Like these people, I mean, they're so honest these days. So that was never something he hid from people, you know, but we'll see. Cars 10W said abolish the police is the plan for anarcho tyranny, aka weaponized anarchy for a leftist agenda, aka directional anarchy. And I think that in some ways, you have people that are starting to see that or kind of notice that, you know, and they don't want their image attached to that. They don't want their image attached to that. Even if they were to defund, you know, some of your local level officers, based on particularly what we've seen out of, I mean, all the previous administrations, but even particularly this one, the feds aren't going anywhere. Like, these people will be funded. But anyway, so we'll see. I just thought this was interesting. It piqued my interest because, you know, I'm always here for a counter narrative, especially when I know that it's on some BS, especially when I know that I've talked about like how we have to be very aware of ways, you know, that we are being used, manipulated, propagandized, being pushed forward as a stereotype, and creating spaces where we're addressing those things. And then that those discussions also pique other people's curiosity and them noticing as well, like, what's really happening here, you know. And so hopefully, I just hope that even not always through like petitioning, but I just hope that it creates some momentum and, you know, kind of like a sense of pride as it relates to even the image that you are representing and being forthcoming about, like, I know mainstream media telling you this me or I agree with this, and no, I don't. And you will be able to find, like I have, there are tons and tons of other people that, like, yeah, I'm with you, like, I agree with you, not with that. So MM said women in Harlem coming home from a late shift at work do not want the police abolished or defunded. Like, it's almost I'm almost thinking now, do I want to do kind of go around interviewing people to see real time responses to what people think about abolishing the police. I'm considering that. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I have to get the setup and stuff to do it. But anyway, so thank y'all. Thank you, MM. Thank y'all for the super chats. Make sure y'all thumbs up so this video gets out. Make sure y'all joining me tomorrow night for Hey Y'all Tuesday. We'll be talking about some other stuff as it relates to what's been going on at the media, in the media and with politics and things like that. Thank y'all for always rocking with me and supporting me, and I will be talking to y'all soon. Bye.